My whole life, I have been the man who notices. Not the large things. Those announce themselves, and anyone with eyes can attend to them. I mean the small wrongness, the thing off true by a single degree, the frame hung a hair out of level, the word that is almost but not quite, the word a person meant, the friend who tells you he slept well in the voice of a man who did not sleep at all. I noticed these the way other people notice cold, without effort and without pride. Because it was never a skill I had worked at. It was only the shape of my attention. Some are born able to carry a tune. I was born able to hear the note that had gone flat. It made me gentle when I was young. That is the part I want to set down first, before anything else, because it is the part I am least sure anyone will believe of me later. I noticed the flat note in people, and I wanted to mend it. A woman at the bread counter counting her coins twice too slow, and I would take longer choosing my loaf so she would not feel watched. A man laughing a half, beat behind the others, and I would find him afterward and stand near him a while. I did not think of it as kindness. I thought of it as tidiness, as putting a crooked thing straight. But it came to the same thing, and for a long time that was all that anyone saw of me, and they called me a good man, and I let them, because it cost me nothing to be called what I appeared to be. Mara saw it differently, Mara said. I noticed people so that I would not have to be noticed back, and that the kindness was a wall I had learned to build very prettily. She said this the way she said everything that was true and unkind, which was lightly, with her chin down and her eyes up, already half laughing, so that you could not be wounded by it without seeming to have no sense of humor. That was a thing she did. She could put a knife in you and hand you the handkerchief in the same motion, and you would thank her. I should tell you about her laugh, because I will be no use to you at all if I cannot make you hear it. It came late. That was the whole of it, and it was everything. Whatever struck her funny, there was a pause first, a half-second, less, in which her face did the work before the sound came, the eyes going first and the mouth following, as if the laugh had to travel up from somewhere deeper than other people kept theirs. In that half-second, you waited. You did not know you were waiting, but you were. And when the laugh came, it was payment for the waiting, and you would have said something foolish all over again just to be charged the same toll twice. I have heard people laugh quickly, on the surface, the way you skip a stone. Hers came up from the bottom of the pond. I used to make poor jokes on purpose, jokes I knew were poor, only to stand in that half-second and watch her decide to be delighted. She took her coffee wrong. I want that written down too. She took it with the milk in first, and then the water barely off the boil poured over, so it was never properly hot. A thing that to my mind was simply incorrect, and I told her so. More than once, in the early days, when I still believed that being right about small things was a service I could render. She would listen to my whole patient explanation about heat and order, and the way a thing should be done, and then she would make it exactly as wrong as before, and drink it looking at me over the rim. And that was her answer. After a while I stopped explaining, after a longer while I began. On the mornings I made it for her, to make it wrong on purpose, milk first, water never quite hot, and to set it by her hand without a word. And she never thanked me for it, which was how I knew she had understood. There are kindnesses you can only do by getting something deliberately wrong. It took me half my life to learn the first of them, and I learned it from a woman who could not boil water correctly and would not be taught. She sang the words wrong as well. There was a song that year. Everyone had it. It came out of every open window, and the line that everyone sang one way she sang another, a line about a door, except in her version it was not a door at all, but something better, something that made no sense and was finer than the meaning it replaced. I told her, once, what the real words were. She heard me out. Then she went on singing it, her way for the rest of our life together. And after a while I could no longer remember the true line at all, only hers. And when the song comes to me now, it is her line that comes, the wrong one, the better one, and I have stopped trying to recover the other. Let it stay lost. It was never as good. We left the cupboard doors open, in that house. That is to say, she left them open, and I went behind her and closed them. And we conducted this for years without ever once discussing it. A slow tide, her opening and me closing, and if you had asked me then which of us was right, I would have told you that a cupboard door is meant to be shut. I am no longer certain. A house in which every door is closed is a house in which no one is in the middle of anything. I would give a great deal now to come into a kitchen and find every cupboard standing open and know, by that alone, that she had just been there. This is the woman. Hold her. I am handing her to you whole. Exactly as she was, because the work I did all day was the work of deciding whether a thing had come back whole, and I would not ask of you a judgment I was unwilling to make myself. The station stood at the low end of the town, where the streets gave up their cobbles to the river, and the fog came off the water in the early shift and did not lift until the bells. I will not tell you the name of the town. It is not modesty. It is that the name would not help you, would in fact mislead you, because you would set the town in a country and the country in a year, and from then on you would be measuring everything I tell you against a world you think you already know, and you do not know it, and the not knowing is the truest thing I can give you. We had bells, and we had fog, and we had a river the color of pewter, and we had the station, and we had the crossing inside it. And that is the whole of the geography you require. The crossing was not a marvel to us. I think that is the hardest thing to convey to anyone who did not grow up alongside it, that by my time it was plumbing. You went in at one station, and you came out at another, very far away, in the time it takes to decide you have arrived. People did it to see their mothers. People did it for work, for love, for a single afternoon at a coast they could not otherwise have reached. The queues on a holiday were a misery. There were posters telling you not to bring liquids. A man near me in the line once complained at length that the benches at the far station were uncomfortable, and this struck no one as strange, that he had been unmade in one place and remade in another, and his chief grievance was the seating. I should say plainly how it worked, because everything that came after rests on it, and because I find that people who have not understood it go on imagining a door, a stepping through, a body that walks in here and walks out there. There is no body that crosses. Nothing crosses. The thing they read from you, here in the half instant in the chamber, they cannot copy. That is not a limit of the machinery. It is a law older than the machinery. The plain fact that you cannot make a true copy of a thing you have not first fully read, and you cannot fully read a living person. Not all of them at once, not without taking them apart in the reading. So the crossing does not copy. It reads what it can, all in the one ruinous instant. And in the same breath, the reading undoes you here completely, and the account of you races ahead down the line. And at the far station they have the matter waiting, ordinary matter, and they build the account back into it, atom set to atom, until what stands up off the far bench is you, assembled out of stuff that was never you, holding your account to the last decimal it could carry. Nothing is lost. I want you to feel how reassuring that was, because it was the truth, and we leaned on it. Conservation, we called it, the way a church-going people might say grace. Whatever went in came out, the books balanced. Not 1 gram, not 1 joule, ever went missing across a crossing. You could audit it, and men did, and the columns always came right. A thing that is perfectly conserved cannot, surely, be a thing that has been harmed. That was the comfort, and it was a real comfort, and I dispensed it daily, and I believed it the way you believe the floor. My work was the decimal. The account that arrives is never the whole of you. It cannot be. The whole of you will not fit. Some last fraction of you stays behind in the instant of the reading, and is gone with the rest of what was undone here. So the thing that stands up at the far station is faithful, very faithful past the power of anyone present to doubt. And it is not, by some final sliver complete. My trade was to look at the faithful thing and say whether the sliver mattered. I sat at the fidelity desk. I signed people faithful. It was, I promise you, considered a dull job, a clerk's job, and the only odd thing about me was that I was thought to be unusually good at it, on account of the way I noticed. The new clerk asked me, in my second week of having her, why we bothered with the file. She was bright, and she was bored, which is the most dangerous thing a clerk can be, and she had been watching me hold a returned man's papers beside the man himself, the photographs, the recorded voice, the long sheet of his answers from before, comparing, taking my time, and she could not see the use of it. He is right here, she said. He is standing in front of you. Why do you read about him, when you can look at him? Because looking tells you almost nothing, I said. Not because I cannot see, because there is nothing, in one look at one man, to see it against. She waited, so I went on, and I will set down what I told her as nearly as I can, because I have had reason since to turn it over. Suppose, I said, that I want to know whether you have come back faithful. I look at you. You look like yourself, of course you do. You would, whatever the truth was, because you have only the one face, and it is the only face I am being shown. One man, one look. There is no wrongness to find, because wrongness is not a thing you can see in a single instance of a person. Wrongness is a difference, needs two terms, and I have only the one of you. You cannot weigh a thing on a scale that has nothing in the other pan. So we keep the file, I said. The file is the other pan. The file is you from before, set down and fixed. The photograph that does not change. The voice on the record saying the same words at the same pitch forever. The answer is in your own hand. Against that I can find the degree you are off. If you are off. Because now I have two of you to lay side by side. And even the file is not enough by itself, I said. Warming to it, the way you do when a young person is finally listening, even one record of one person can fool you. A bad photograph, a day you had a cold. The real reading is across all of you, all the thousands who cross. The whole population laid out, because a drift too small to see in any one person stands up plain as a flag when you have 10,000 of them. And the average has slid. That is where the truth lives. Not in the man, in the crowd of which the man is one. She thought about this, then she said, and I have never forgotten it, she said it lightly. The way you say a thing you do not know is terrible. Then how does a man check himself? He does not, I said. He cannot. There is only ever one of him, and he is the one thing in the world. He can never lay beside another and measure. That is what the rest of us are for. I said it as a small joke, the way you would, a clerk's wry little proverb to send a clever girl back to her desk pleased with herself, and she laughed quickly on the surface. The way the young laugh, and I remember thinking that her laugh was a skip stone, and that I knew a better one waiting for me at home. And we went back to the work, and I signed the faithful man faithful, and that was all that happened, and it was nothing at all. Soren came through the hall near the end of the shift. He did that, walked his own floors at the hour the queues thinned, with his hands behind him, looking at the crossing the way a man looks at a view he owns. He stopped at my desk because he always stopped at my desk. My desk was, I understood without resentment, a thing he valued, the way a craftsman values the one true edge on his tool. The whole house ran on my saying faithful. If I would not say it, the queues did not move. He asked what I had turned away that day, and I told him, the two I had held back, the man whose pauses had lengthened, the woman whose handwriting had lost its slant, both of them sent for a second reading. He nodded, pleased, not at the holding back, but at the having looked. Then he said the thing he always said, in the mild voice of a man stating a sum. You know the part you hold back is smaller than a breath, he said, smaller than the difference between her this morning and her tonight. You are guarding a fraction, no instrument, but you can even find. He smiled. We do not lose them, veil, we keep them. Faithful enough, and faithful enough in this life, is the only faithful there is. Show me the man who is the same at dusk as he was at dawn, and I will show you a photograph. I had no argument. I have never had an argument against Soren that survived contact with him, because the dreadful thing about Soren was that he was, on every term he allowed you, correct. I told him so. He took it as agreement, which it almost was, and he went on down the hall with his hands behind his back, well pleased with the day and with me, and the fog had not yet thinned, and the bells had not yet rung. I want to be fair to him. He believed every word, and the words were good ones, and a great many people who crossed and came back and lived their whole faithful. Enough lives afterward owed those lives to his believing it. He was not a liar. He was something for which we did not yet have the use of a word. Neither was I. We were two careful men in a clean hall, keeping the books balanced. And the books did balance, and that is the part you must not let go of even now. The columns came right. They always came right. Whatever else this is, it is not a story about a theft. Nothing was ever stolen. Everything was conserved. She had left the cupboards open. I came in from the fog with the cold of it still on my coat, and the kitchen was as she always left it, every door standing wide, the evidence of a woman in the middle of a dozen things. And she was at the table with her coffee going wrong in her hands. Milk first, never quite hot, singing the line about the door that was not a door, and she did not turn around. She only said, "You held two back today, I can tell. You have your holding back face." And I said, "How can you see my face? You are not looking at me." And she said, "I do not need to look at you. I have you by heart." And there it was, before I had even put down my coat, the half-second, the pause, the eyes going first, and then the laugh coming up from the bottom of the pond to meet me where I stood dripping in the doorway. And I was paid in full, as I was always paid, for the small foolish toll of having come home. I made her another coffee wrong, the way she liked, and set it by her hand, and she did not thank me, and I went round the kitchen behind her closing all the doors, and she let me, and neither of us said anything about either thing, because we had said all of it years ago by not saying it, and the saying was long done. That is where I will leave us tonight, her at the table with the wrong coffee and the better words, me at the cupboards, putting the crooked world straight one small door at a time, a good man, by every account that anyone kept, including my own. Hold her there. I am asking you to remember her exactly as she was on that evening. The whole of her, every degree of her true. I want you to have seen her, too. She crossed on the first Thursday of every month to see her mother, and she had done it so often that it was no longer a journey, only an errand, a thing she did with her coat half on, calling back over her shoulder the thing she had not got round to saying all week. The kettle is playing up. You will see to the man about the kettle. There is a tin of the good tea behind the bad tea. Do not let me come home and find you have been drinking the good tea. I love you. Mind the step. It is wet. I signed her transit myself on those mornings, the way you might butter your own bread. It was the smallest of the marks I made in a day, a clerk's name on a clerk's page, and I put it to her crossing with no more thought than I gave the 400 others I would sign before the bells, because everyone crossed, and her mother lived 3 stations down the line in a town we could not otherwise have reached before dark, and the crossing made a Thursday of what would once have eaten a week. There was no rule against a man certifying his own wife, and it would not have occurred to me to want one. My name on a page was the one thing in the world I trusted without looking, and I put it under hers, as readily as under any stranger's, and went on to the next page. She went. I marked the page. I watched her join the line with her coat still half on, and she did not look back, because she never looked back, because to her it was the bread counter, and the post office, and she would be home by the time the lamps came on. She was home by the time the lamps came on. I had the coffee ready, made wrong, milk first, and the water off the boil, sitting by her place at the table going the gentle tepid she preferred. And I heard the door, and I called out something. I no longer know what. Some small worn joke off the top of the day. The kind of thing I said precisely because it was not funny, because I had spent a life learning that the poorer the joke, the longer I got to stand in the half-second, before she decided to be delighted by me anyway. She laughed. She laughed, and it was her laugh, the right pitch, the right warmth, the sound I would have known in a dark room full of strangers, and it came at once. It came on the beat. There was no pause. The eyes did not go first. The thing did not travel up from the bottom of the pond. It was simply there, prompt and lovely and on time, the way a well made laugh arrives in a well-made person. And I stood in the doorway with my hand, still on the cold of the latch, and I reached for the toll, and the toll was not charged. I want to be exact, because exactness is the only honest thing I have. It was not that the laugh was wrong. If the laugh had been wrong, I would have had something to hold. It was that the laugh was right, and the half-second before it was gone, and the half-second was the part that had been hers, and you cannot point at an absence. You cannot say to a woman, the empty quarter, beat in front of your laughter has left us. There was nothing there to indicate. There was only the place where something had been, and the place looked exactly like the rest of the evening, and she was already moving past me into the warm kitchen, saying that her mother sent her love, and had I seen to the man about the kettle. I had not seen to the man about the kettle, she said. This would not surprise her in a saint. She went to the cupboard for the good cup, the one she always took down on a Thursday, because seeing her mother both gladdened and cost her, and she left the cupboard door standing open behind her. Wide, the way she always did, the small flag of a woman in the middle of something, and she picked up the wrong coffee I had made her and drank it looking at me over the rim, the milk first tepid wrongness of it, with the exact face she had always made, and she sang, putting the cup down half under her breath, the line about the thing that was not a door, her line, the better one. So I told myself I had imagined it. That is the whole of what I did, and I did it in less time than it takes to write. I laid out the evidence the way I laid it out at my desk all day, and the evidence was overwhelming, and the evidence acquitted her. The cupboard stood open. The coffee was wrong in the right way. The words of the song were her own invented words. Every tale I had loved her by was present and reporting for duty. Every one. And against that weight of faithful detail, what did I have? A missing quarter beat, a toll uncollected, a thing I could not point at and could not measure and could not, if I am honest, have sworn to in any court, because there was only the one of her in the kitchen and nothing in the world to lay her beside. I knew the shape of the thought, even as I refused it. Of course I knew it. I spent my days knowing it. If she had come up to my desk a stranger, a returnee in the queue, and a colleague had slid me her papers and asked for my mark, and I had watched her laugh come a quarter, beat early off a poor joke, I would have held her back. I would not have hesitated. I would have written the small, careful note that sent her for a second reading, and I would have felt nothing doing it but the quiet satisfaction of a man who has caught the thing others would have waved through. That is what I was for. That is what I was good at. But she was not a returnee at my desk. She was Mara in our kitchen, with her coat finally off, drinking wrong coffee and leaving the cupboard open, and singing it her way, and a man does not run a reading on his own wife across the supper table. A man takes down the good cup beside her and lets her tell him about her mother. So that is what I did. I took down the good cup. I let her tell me about her mother, and the not measuring felt at the time like love. I have to tell you that it felt like love, because if I let you think it felt like cowardice, I will have lied to you. And the whole use of my telling you any of this is that I will not. I did not sleep well, and I am not the kind of man who does not sleep well. And that, more than the laugh, is what took me to Esme's 3 days later. I told myself I was collecting the prints. There were always prints to collect. Esme photographed half the town and kept the other half waiting, and I had a docket somewhere with my name on it from the spring. So I had a reason, a real one, a thing I could hold up, and I held it up to myself the whole way down to the low streets, and I did not once admit that what I wanted was the other pan. You will remember what I told the new clerk. You cannot weigh a thing on a scale with nothing in the other pan. One man, one look, tells you nothing, because wrongness is a difference, and a difference needs 2 terms. I had spent the week with 1 term. I had Mara, the single living instance of her, and against her there was only my own memory, and my own memory was no use at all, because memory drifts, memory flatters. Memory is the worst record there is, a thing that rewrites itself each time you take it out to look. I needed a term that did not drift. I needed a thing set down and fixed, the photograph that does not change. And in all the world, there was exactly 1 person who kept those. Esme's studio smelled the way it had always smelled, of the chemicals and the cold and the particular dust of a room where the light is let in carefully and the rest of the time kept out. She was at the long table when I came in, 2 prints under her hands, and she did not look up at once. She studied faces a beat too long. She had always done it. It was the thing that made her good, and the thing that made strangers uneasy, and the thing that had made me, when I was young and she photographed me for the station file, feel for the first time in my life that I had been actually seen rather than merely noticed, which I had always assumed were the same act and are not. She gave me the spring prints without my asking, because she had known the docket was a pretext before I was through the door. She knew that about people. It was her trade. I asked, as lightly as I could make it, whether she still had the old plates of Mara, the ones from years back. I made it sound like sentiment. I am good at making things sound like other things. She had them. Of course she had them. She kept everything, dated, in the long flat drawers, and she found the sleeve without hunting, and she laid one print on the cold table under the careful light, and there was my wife. There was my wife from years before, and Esme had caught her, as only Esme could, not in the laugh but in the half-second before it. The eyes had gone first, the mouth had not yet moved, the whole face was poised on the edge of a delight it had decided on but not yet spent that quarter. Beat held still on silver where it could never drift and never flatter and never rewrite itself. The toll, the waiting, the part that had been hers, fixed and dated and lying on the table in front of me where I could lay it. At last, beside the evening I had had 3 nights before. I looked at it for a long time. Esme let me. She is the only person I have ever known who could let a silence simply be the length it needed to be. Then she said, not as a question, in the flat, quiet voice she kept for true things, that I had not come about the spring prince. I said no. She looked at the photograph, and then she looked at me, the beat too long, and she said that faces change, that everyone's face changes, that she had a drawer full of the same person at 20 and 40 and 60, and not one of them matched and all of them were the person. She said it gently. She said it the way you offer someone a door out of a room you are not sure they should leave by. And then she said the other thing. The thing I have kept. She said it looking down at her own hands. She said that she would be the last person in the world to trust on it, because she had only ever the one drawer and the one pair of eyes, and a woman who has spent her life learning how a face should sit cannot ever be sure, when one sits wrong, whether the face has moved or she has. There is no one, she said, who can check the checker. I told her it was nothing. I said it kindly, to spare her, as though she were the one who needed sparing. I said faces change, that she was right, that I had been tired and reading shadows. I took my spring prints, and I left the old plate of Mara on the cold table under the careful light, because I could not have said why I wanted it, and I could not bear to ask. She was entirely herself when I came home. I want that set down with the same exactness as the rest, because it is the truth. She was entirely herself. The cupboard in the kitchen stood open. The coffee, when she made her own, went wrong in the way I loved. She got a word of a song deliberately and gorgeously incorrect, and would not be corrected. She put a knife in me about the man and the kettle, and handed me the handkerchief in the same motion, and I thanked her for it. Every degree of her was true, every degree but one, and the one was a quarter. Beat of silence in front of a laugh, and no living person could have found it, and I had found it, because finding such things was the whole of what I was, and because I loved her, which I had always believed were the same act, and was beginning, that night, to fear or not. I kept a notebook, a small one, and had for years, and into it I had always put the things that were off by a degree, the frame out of level, the friend who slept badly, and said he slept well, and the entries were mostly tender ones, because the things you notice about people when you are warm are tender things. That night I sat up after she slept, and I opened it, and I wrote her name, and under her name I wrote. The half-second is gone, and I sat with the pen, and I did not write anything else, because there was nothing else to write, no cause, no measure, no second instance, but the one on silver lying on a cold table across the town, and a man cannot keep a record of an absence. He can only keep a record of the place where he first felt one. Nothing is lost, I told myself. I lay down beside her in the dark, and I said it the way the whole of us said it. The grace we said over the crossing, the comfort that had never once failed me. Nothing is lost. Whatever goes in comes out. The books balance to the last decimal. You can audit them. Men do. The columns always come right. I said the words over, there in the dark, and they were true. Every one of them, and I waited for them to do what they had always done. I lay a long time waiting, with her breathing even and entirely herself beside me, every degree of her true, but the columns always came right. I have set down only what happened. What happened was that the words were true, and they did not help. The station took 400 through the crossing on a high day and something under half that in the low months, and I marked the greater part of them, because a transit was not lawful until a verifier had put his name to it, and I was the senior verifier, and had been for longer than most of the clerks had been alive. You should know what it was to stand in that hall, because I stood in it for the better part of my life, and I have never been able to make a stranger see it. Picture a long room of pale stone with the high windows kept shuttered against the river light, so that the only brightness was the working light. White and even, the light Esme would have hated, a light with no opinion about anyone. Down the center ran the line. The queue, which was never not there, it thinned at the bells and swelled before them, but it never emptied, because somewhere down every minute of the day a mother was wanted 3 stations off, or a coast, or a deathbed, and the crossing made an afternoon of a journey that had once taken a life its whole length to make. At the head of the line stood the chamber, and I will not describe the chamber because there was nothing to see, which was the worst of it. People expect a marvel, and they are given a clean gray closet and a hum, and they go in, and the hum changes pitch, and the closet is empty, and 3 stations down a closet that was also empty is not. That is the entire spectacle. We took the wonder out of it within a year of having it. People complained about the queues. My desk was past the chamber on the return side where the remade came through. They came through dressed as they had gone, holding what they had carried, because the account of a man includes his coat and his case and the letter in his pocket, all of it red and unmade and built again out of the waiting matter. Faithful to the crease, they came through and they were directed to the benches. And the benches fed the desks, and the busiest of the desks was mine. And at mine they were checked against the file before they were let go into the far city to be whatever they now were. That morning there was a woman near the front of my line who had not crossed before. You learn to find the first-timers without looking. They hold their papers in both hands, and they read every notice on the wall twice, and they have the particular stillness of people who have been told a thing is safe by everyone they trust and do not, in the body, believe it. She was old, and she was crossing to a son, and her hands on the papers were not steady, and there was a younger woman behind her, no relation, who kept up a low kind murmur. It is nothing. My mother does it monthly. You will not feel a thing. There was a version of me that would have come round the desk to that woman. I knew the version, I had been him, I'd spent 30 years being him, finding the frightened ones and standing near them, taking longer over my own small business, so they would not feel watched. The bread counter, all of it grown up and put in a uniform. I want to set down plainly what I did instead, because it is the truth, and because no one in that hall saw anything in it to remark on, least of all me. I did my work well, and I did it quickly. When she came to my desk shaking, I checked her against her file with an efficiency I had refined to something very near grace. The photograph, the recorded voice, the sheet of her answers, my eye going over the remade woman and finding her faithful in the time it takes most men to find their pen, and I signed her, and I said, next, I was kind. I want to be exact. I was not unkind. I told her she was free to go to her son, but I told it over her shoulder, already reaching for the next file, and I did not come round the desk, and it did not once occur to me that I might. The line was long. She was faithful. There was a next file. It was the new clerk who came round the desk to the old woman. It was the new clerk who walked her to the far door with a hand at her elbow. I watched the girl do the thing I no longer did, and I felt a flicker of the impatience. A swift man feels watching a slow one, and I called her back to her desk because the line was long. I was simply good at my work. Every word of that is true. I was fast because I was practiced. I was spare because sentiment slows a man, and the line was long, and the line was real, mothers and deathbeds and coasts, and a verifier who dawdles in his feelings only keeps a frightened woman standing longer in her fear. You can build the whole of it into a virtue. And I had, and it was not even a lie. I had become more useful. Everyone agreed I had become more useful. They had no other word for it, and neither did I. It was Soren who had the word, or who had, at least, the blessing. He found me at the desk near the end of the shift, hands behind his back, watching the line go down, and he had with him a man from the funding side whom I did not know. A soft gray man who looked at people the way you look at columns, and Soren was showing me off. He did that. I was a thing he had found, and he liked to be seen to have found me. He told the gray man that I had turned back 2 that week. The second readers had passed. 2 the instruments had called faithful, and that I had been right both times. He said it the way another man might say his dog had pointed where the gun saw nothing. And then he said, to me, in the mild voice he kept for his truest things, "You have got very good. Vale, you used to take an age over them." He smiled. "You used to feel your way. Now you simply see. You have found your rigor." I should tell you how that landed, because it is the center of the chapter, and the rest is only the room around it. It landed as praise, and I took it as praise, and it was praise from the one man whose praise I had ever wanted, and what he named in me was real. I had stopped feeling my way. I did simply see now. And I stood there in the white working light being told that the thing the years had done to me was the thing a master craftsman does to himself by discipline. And I believed it. And the gray man wrote something in a small book. And I was, for the length of it, happy. I will set down only one more thing about Soren that evening, because it is the seed of everything he is, and I would not have you meet him later without it. The gray man asked him, idly, the funder's idle question, whether the verifiers ever made him uneasy, whether it troubled him to run a house on one man's eye for the part that gets left behind. And Soren said no, and he said it kindly, looking at the chamber he had built, and he said, the part that gets left behind is smaller than the difference between the man who walked in and the man who would have walked out an hour later if he had never crossed at all. We are all of us leaking ourselves by the hour, he said. We call it living. Veilguard's a fraction thinner than a night's sleep. He smiled at me, and he meant it as a gift, and it was one. We do not lose them, he said. We keep them faithful enough, and faithful enough is the only faithful there has ever been. The gray man wrote that down, too. I remember thinking it well said, and true, and I went home. She had made a thing of the evening because she did that, because she could not let a plain Tuesday be plain if she had the materials to mutiny against it. There were candles she had got from somewhere and a dish she had attempted past her competence and largely won, and the window was open to the river cold because she liked the candles to fight something, and she was singing when I came in. The line about the thing that was not a door, her line, and she did not stop singing to greet me. She only opened one arm without turning round, an invitation to come and be sung at, and I went and stood in it. This is the warmth, and I am setting it down for you on purpose. She was wholly alive that evening. She put a knife in me about the candles, that a man who certified faithful copies for his living might have noticed his own wife had been replaced by a more romantic woman, and handed me the wine in the same motion. And I laughed, and my laugh, you will note, came when it was meant to, because there was nothing wrong with me that anyone could see. She told me a long, unlikely story about her day that I am certain was 3/4 invention, and was the better for it. She left every cupboard in the kitchen standing open. She took her coffee, afterward, milk first and never quite hot, wrong in the way that was hers, and the half. Second, before her laughter, I will tell you, I did not test for it that night. I had stopped testing for it. I do not know whether it had come back, or whether I had only stopped reaching for the toll, and I have not been able to find out since, because a man cannot take his own reading, and a wife is the one instrument he can never lay beside another. And then, late, with the candles guttering and the river loud, she said the thing, lightly, chin down and eyes up, already half wanting it not to matter, you came in quiet tonight. You have been coming in quiet. She turned my hand over in hers as though my palm were a file she could read. You used to come home still full of them, she said. The ones you turned back, the ones you saved. You used to bring them all the way home and tell me, you have gone quiet, she said. Where do you go? I told her I was tired. I told her the line had been long, which was true. The line was always true. I told her that a man gets better at a thing by minding it less, that it was only competence she was feeling. The same competence Soren had praised in me that very evening, and I offered her his words because they had comforted me. We are all leaking ourselves by the hour. We call it living, and she listened to the whole of it with her chin down. And she did not laugh, and she did not argue. And after a while she said, "All right," and took a wrong coffee to the window to watch the river, and let me close the cupboards behind her. She had found something. She was the one instrument in the world that was pointed at me, and she had turned it on me the way I turned mine on the line all day, and she had told me what she found gently, chin down, the way you offer someone the door out of a room. And I had stood in our kitchen with Soren's gift in my mouth and given it back to her, kindly, patiently. The way I explained things to clever, frightened people all day long, that what she felt was discipline and not distance, and that she should not trouble herself, and that I was, after all these years, simply getting very good. I wrote her name in the notebook before I slept. I did not write that I had come in quiet. I wrote, "M imagines a change in me, overtired, both of us." The line very long this month, I read it back. It was a true entry, every word, the kind of careful note a careful man makes about a wife who frets, and I was satisfied with it, and I closed the book. There is no one who can check the checker, Esme had said to me once across a cold table. I had taken her, at the time, to be speaking of photographs. The house had two faces, and for most of my life I had been shown only the kind one. The kind face was the hall. The other was a corridor on an upper floor that I had walked beneath for 30 years without counting the doors, and behind the doors were the men who paid, because a thing that cost what the crossing cost was never paid for by women going to their sons. I had always known they were up there. I had arranged not to wonder about them. The way you arrange a great many things when the line is long, and your part of it is clean. He was waiting at my desk at the end of the shift, in the place where Soren stood, and he had brought himself a cup of the clerk's tea and let it go cold in front of him, untouched, the whole time he spoke, which I noticed because I noticed everything, and which told me he had not come for tea, but had wanted his hands given something to hold. Mr. Carr. I had met him 3 times and forgotten him 3 times, and watching him not drink the tea I understood that the forgetting was not a fault of mine. He had a face built to leave no print, a gray evenness, a courtesy so complete that it worked the way a shut door works. He knew my name and used it. He did not, I think, know the name of the man he had come about, and would not have thought the lack worth remarking, because to Mr. Carr a person was a line in a column, and you do not name a line, you reconcile it. He came at it sideways, the way careful men come at things. He admired the hall, he said. The house did fine work, kind work, he asked, as if it had only then occurred to him how often the channel failed. Rarely, I said. Twice a year in a bad year. The reading goes down the line and nothing assembles at the far end. A flaw in the wiring. We grieve it and we go on. He nodded as though I had told him something that settled his mind. He said that was his own understanding. Then he turned the cold cup a quarter, turn on the desk, and said there was a crossing on the Thursday, the Eastern line, a man the funding side had an interest in, an interest he would not burden me with, and that all he wanted was that I should be the one to take the departure and put my name to it. Nothing irregular. The most regular crossing the house had ever logged, over the hand it trusted most. I let the silence sit to see what he would put into it. He put nothing into it. He turned the cup back the quarter. Turn it had come, and waited, and his waiting was the answer, and I had it. I understood him completely, and I want to be plain that I understood him there at the desk, and not later, in some softer light. He was telling me the Thursday man would not arrive. He was telling me the channel would fail on the Eastern line, as the channel sometimes truly did, and that what he wanted from me was the single thing that would make his failure indistinguishable from the real ones. A faithful departure, over a name no one would question. My signature would not unmake the man. The chamber unmade everyone. My signature would make the dark closet at the far end, where the face of the blameless accident, the house already wept over twice a year. I did not refuse him. I set that down plainly. I did not refuse, and I did not agree, because he had not asked a thing that admits of agreement. He had asked only that I do my work faithfully on a Thursday, which was the one thing I had never in my life been asked twice to do. He thanked me by name, warmly, left the cold tea standing where it was, and went. And an hour later, I could not have told you the color of his coat. I mentioned it to Soren the next time he stood at my desk, not as a confession, for I had nothing to confess but the way you mention a thing to the man who runs the house. I said Carr had asked for my name on a Thursday crossing, and that I thought the man would not arrive. Soren listened with his hands behind his back, looking at the chamber, and he did not pretend not to understand me, because Soren never pretended. Pretense was beneath the elegance of him. He said the upstairs business was upstairs. He said it kindly. He had built a thing that read a man faithfully and set him down faithfully, he said, and that was the whole of what he had built and the whole of what he would answer for. As a smith answers for the steel and not for the customer's use of the knife, we keep faithful every one we are given to keep. Veil, he smiled. What we are not given to keep was never ours to lose. It was a fine thing to have said, and true on every term he allowed, and I have not found the flaw in it, then or since, though I have come to think there is one, somewhere under the floor of it, in a room that none of his sentences have a door to. The Thursday man came to my desk in the middle of the Eastern departures, and I would not have known him from the 400 if Carr had not bought him for me. He was ordinary, a brown coat, a case with a strap mended in a color that did not match, the nervousness the careful ones have. While I checked him against his file, he told me, because frightened people tell me things, that he was going about work, that his wife thought it beneath him, but a man takes what there is, that he would be home by the lamps. I checked his photograph and his recorded voice and the sheet of his answers. I read the man against the record, and the man was faithful, the reading clean, and I signed him because he was faithful, and what I signed was true. Then I watched him carry his mended case to the chamber, and I watched the gray door draw across him, and I heard the hum climb its half tone, and the closet stood empty, as it always stands empty, and the account of him went down the Eastern line entire and true. I would swear to it now. The man left faithfully. He did not arrive. The closet at the far station stayed dark. The house posted its rare grief, a regrettable failure on the Eastern line, condolences carried to the family, and my name sat at the head of the departure log, where it made a dark closet look like weather. I felt reading the notice, the small, clean satisfaction of a page that reconciles. I wrote nothing in the notebook. There was nothing off by a degree. Everything was exactly true. She had heard of it before I had, the streets being faster than any channel. A woman 3 doors down, a husband lost to a crossing that did not arrive, the Eastern line a Thursday. Mara was full of it when I came in, full of the woman, not the husband, because she grieved toward the living. She would take her something, she decided out loud, rejecting her own ideas as too much or too little, and she pulled me into it the way she pulled me into everything. What would you take? You must have an opinion. She settled on bread, because bread is a thing a person can take from you without having to be grateful for it. And she was right. She was always right about people. It was the thing she had instead of my eye. She made it that night with the window open to the river, singing as she worked, the line about the door, and she left the flour out and the cupboard open. And I sat at the table and watched her, and I knew exactly what the dark closet on the Eastern line had been. And I said nothing, and I was not sorry, and the not being sorry did not trouble me. Nothing is lost. The matter feeds the next crossing. The columns come right. She took the widow the bread in the morning, warm, in a cloth, and the woman wept on her, and Mara came home steadied by having been of use. And the cupboard stood open all that day like small mouths, and I went up to the house and signed 400 faithful, and came home, and she had left them open still. She crossed twice that month, and 3 times the next. Her mother was failing, and a failing mother is a tide. I signed her transits, every one. My name under hers as readily as under any stranger's, because she came home faithful each time, or near enough that I could not have held her, and a man does not hold his own wife on a near enough. One morning the kitchen was wrong, and it took me a moment to find the wrongness, because the wrongness was that there was none. The cupboards were shut. All of them square, a tidy row. She sat at the table with her coffee, and the coffee was steaming. She had made it hot. She had made it correctly. The water brought the whole way to the boil and poured the way I had told her for years. It should be done, and for years she had refused. And she was drinking it down and had not noticed she had made it so. She hummed a few bars of the song about the door. And the line, when it came, was the true line, the written words, the one she had refused for 40 years, and she sang them now without knowing she had given them up. I did not reach across the table and take her hands and beg her to get it wrong. I made the notes I make. Coffee, correct. Cupboards shut. The line, true. I read my wife across the breakfast table with the clean economy Soren had praised in me, and the reading came clear, and I was satisfied with how clear it came. Then I closed the notebook and went up to the house. She had a file at the station. She crossed often enough to have one intake and recording in a sheet of answers, kept in the long drawers with the rest. I had never looked at it. There was no reason to look at it. She was not my work. I looked at it that afternoon between departures, the way you do a thing when you have decided not to examine your reasons for doing it. The recording was years old. From the first time she crossed, when the clerk reads you a passage, and you read it back so the voice is fixed for the file. Her voice came out of the machine into the white working light, younger, reading the dull passage, and at the end of it the clerk had said something off the record, the small joke clerks make, and she had laughed. The laugh was on the band, the whole of it. I did not need the eyes. The ear hears what the eyes would have told you. The pause first, the half second, the small lateness while the thing came up from the bottom of the pond, and then the laugh paid out warm and entire. It had been in the drawer the whole time, the toll she used to charge, recorded and dated and kept. I stood in the hall with the machine at my ear, and I listened to it 4 times. Not because it moved me, I want to be exact. Because it was the cleanest reading I had ever had, the before and the after at last in the one hand, and the whole difference between them was a quarter-second of silence that no longer existed anywhere in the world, except on a band of tape in a drawer. I put the file back. I logged that I had drawn it, because the rules require it, and I wrote the reason as routine review, which was true. It was the most routine thing I had ever done. I should set down how I met her, since you have had her tells from me for a while now and ought to know they were earned, all of them, on one afternoon. It was a fair, the year before the crossing came, when a journey was still a journey. A man ground a barrel, organ through the song that was everywhere that year, the one about the door, and a step from me in the crowd a girl sang along with it and had the words wrong. Not mumbled. Wrong, clear, a whole line of her own where the true line should have stood. I was young and already myself, already unable to let a thing sit a degree off true, and I leaned over and told her those were not the words. She brought her chin down and her eyes up. She held my eye turned back to the organ, and sang the line again, her way, louder. That was the courtship. 8 bars on a wrong line, the man who needed the world set right and the woman who would not be set right, settling it in front of a barrel. Organ, the coffee, the lyric, the open doors, every wrong thing she kept wrong on purpose. All of it was that first wrong line, sung again, louder, for 40 years. The crossing keeps what can be justified and loses. A sliver at a time, the unjustifiable. 11 crossings is a wrong line made right. The machine had pared away the part of her that held no reason a faithful reading could keep, the part that was pure choice and pure waste and pure her. That part was the whole of her. Esme sent for me that winter, which she had never done. She had the long table covered, prints laid in pairs, the same face twice, a younger beside an older 40 pairs, 50. Not one of them was Mara, which was the thing she had sent for me to see, the baker, the man at the eastern gate, 2 of the rivermen, all crossers, all photographed across the years, because she had photographed everyone, and she had been laying the pairs out in the dark of her own evenings, and could not stop. "Look," she said, "not at the age. Past the age." And I looked, and it was there, the thing I had read across my own table, and heard on a band of tape, laid out 50 times on silver where it could not flatter and could not drift. The faces had not aged wrong. They had aged smooth. Every late face was a degree more correct than its early one. The small asymmetries gone. The mouth eased into a set that any mouth might make. The eyebrow that used to climb on its own now matching its brother. 50 people made faithful, made better, made nobody. You cannot find it in one. She had 50 pans now, and the average had slid, and silver does not misremember. She was frightened, and not only of the thing. She was frightened of her own eye. She had been at it for months and could not be sure, even with the table full, whether the faces had moved or she had. Whether a woman who has spent her life learning how a face should sit can trust herself when 50 of them sit wrong, or whether the wrongness was only her, alone in her dark room with her drawer. "There is no one," she said, "who can check the checker." And she looked at me, because I was the checker the whole town trusted, the I the house was built on, and she was asking me, without asking, to tell her she was not mad. I had more pans than she would gather in 3 lives, 400 a day for 30 years. I knew she was not mad. I knew the smoothing was real, and everywhere, and patient, and winning, and I knew it past any doubt. I looked at the 50 faithful faces of my neighbors on the cold table under the careful light, and I told her that faces change. I told her everyone's face changes, that she had a drawer full of the same person at 20 and 40 and 60, and not one of them matched, and all of them were the person, which were her own words, given back to her to close the door she had opened. And she let me. She took the comfort, because the other thing was the truth, and she was still warm enough to need comforting, and I was not, and I went home. Mara was awake in the dark when I came in, sitting up, not reading. She said my name, the one she alone still used. Then she said I'd stop telling her the small things I noticed about her. "You did it for years," she said. "You have not in a long while." She turned my hand over in hers, light, the chin down where I could not see it. "Have I run out of small things?" she said. "Or have you stopped looking?" I had not stopped looking. I looked at her more clearly than at anything in the world. I could have catalogued her in the dark, the 11 slivers, the coffee, the doors, the line gone true. Looking was the one thing I never stopped. It was only that the looking no longer came with the other thing. The thing that had once made me lean across a crowd to set a wrong line right, because I could not bear a lovely thing to be off by a degree. And I had no name for the other thing. And I could not give her what I could not name. So I told her there was nothing to notice, that she was exactly herself. She heard what was in it and what was not, she said. All right. The way she had taken to saying all right, and she lay down with her back to me, and I listened to her breathe, even in faithful and nearly whole, and somewhere down the line a closet stood dark, and on a cold table 50 faithful faces caught the light, and in a drawer at the station a quarter-second of silence still existed that existed nowhere else on earth, and the columns came right. They always came right. I have never in my life found one that did not. Her mother died slowly at the far end of the eastern line, and for the better part of a season Murrah was always either going or coming back. Dying is not one event but a long correspondence, and the crossing let her answer every letter in person, a morning at the bedside and home by the lamps, and then word would come and she would go again. She crossed more that season than in all the years before it together. I marked her transits, everyone, as I had marked them for years, because a man does not stand between his wife and her mother's deathbed over a clerk's caution, and because she came home faithful each time, or near enough, and you cannot hold a grieving woman on a near enough. The rare thing finds the one who stands in front of it most often. I knew that the way I knew all the figures of my trade, and I signed her across and back, and did not once let the figure become a face. She was tired in a way the crossing does not account for. The tiredness of the long watch, and by that season she had stopped singing in the kitchen. The right words or the wrong, and she left fewer doors open. And I laid the quiet in her to grief, which was true. Grief smooths a person as surely as a crossing does. I could not have told you how much of her stillness was the dying mother, and how much was the 12th crossing and the 13th, because there was only the one of her and nothing to lay her beside. But a tape in a drawer I did not, that season, take out. The morning she went the last time she was up before me. The kettle already boiled, 2 cups set out. She had made mine the way mine should be made, and hers I saw, the same, both correct, both hot, and she did not seem to know there had ever been another way she took it. She said she would be back by the lamps. I have kept the sentence, because a careful man keeps the last of any record, and I have gone over it the way I go over everything, and there is nothing in it, no sign, no degree off true, only a woman telling her husband she will be home by dark, which is the most ordinary thing she could have said, and the thing I have. I took her departure myself. She came to my desk the way the 400 strangers came, and I checked her against her file, the photograph and the recorded voice and the sheet of her answers, and she was faithful. The reading clean, I would swear to it now as I have sworn to all of them. I signed her. She went to the chamber with her coat half on, the way she always wore it, and she did not look back because she never looked back. I watched the gray door draw across her. I heard the hum climb its half-tone. The closet stood empty, as it always stands empty. She did not arrive. They held the far closet open the regulation hour, and then the second hour, and nothing assembled, and the eastern line was stopped while they went over the wiring, and they found what they always find, which is nothing, because a channel that fails leaves no more trace than a wind that drops. A rare and blameless failure on the eastern line. The house grieved it the way the house grieved them all. A notice. A folded form, the particular hush money keeps for the deaths it did not intend. She was not back by the lamps. My name stood at the head of her departure log, where I had put it, faithful, an hour before. I knew what I had once told a clever clerk about the failures, and what Carr had told me across a cup of tea he did not drink, that an engineered absence and a true one cannot be told apart, that the whole worth of a clean departure is to make the one wear the face of the other. So I could not know which my wife had been. I could not know whether the channel had simply dropped, the rare wind, or whether some line in some column 3 floors above me had wanted reconciling, and mine had been the trusted name they reached for. There was no way to know. There has never been a way to know, and I have lived inside the not knowing since the way you live inside a climate. I did not go up the stairs. I set that down because a different man would have, and I have watched that man, in my mind, take the corridor and put his hands on the gray coat and ask. I did not ask. I did not tear the house apart. I did not demand the wiring logs, which I had the rank to demand, because I knew there would be nothing in them, nothing being what a clean failure is made of, and beneath the knowing there was the other absence, the place the asking should have come from and did not, because the part of me that would have torn the house apart for her was the part the years had already spent, and I did not miss it, and the not missing it did not trouble me. Even there, even then. I went home, and it was in the house that it showed. She had left the cupboards open her whole life, every door of them standing wide, the small flag of a woman in the middle of something, and for 40 years I had gone behind her and shut them, the 2 of us conducting it without a word, her opening and my closing. A slow tide. That evening the cupboards were shut, because she had shut them herself on her last morning, correct and hot and tidy, and there was no one to open them again. I went round the kitchen out of habit and found nothing to close. A house in which every door is shut is a house in which no one is in the middle of anything. Everything of her that could be kept was still in it, and kept. Her cup, washed and put away, her lists by the door, the kettle, the man about the kettle, the chair at the angle she left chairs, the book face down on the table she would not now finish, my own hand in the notebook across 40 years, saying Mara, and in the long drawers at the station her file and her tape and the sheet of her answers, and in Esme's flat drawers across the town the plates, the face caught in the half-second before a laugh. All of it faithful, all of it dated. All of it still saying Marat exactly in every place a thing can say a person, and the woman it spoke of was not in the house and would not be home by the lamps. The record said Mara in every room, and the world did not contain her. I had spent my whole life unable to leave a reading and a record at odds, unable to bear a lovely thing off true by a single degree. And here was the whole of her off true, by the one degree that does not come back, the degree between a woman and her absence. That is the last thing I will set down of that season. Everything that had ever recorded her remained, exact, in the house and the drawers and the long files. And I was the man the whole house trusted to make a record, and the world agree. The record said Mara, and the world did not contain her, and I could not bear it. I had said all my life that I could not bear a lovely thing off true by a single degree, and here was the whole of her off true by the only degree there is, and I could not bear it. I had the rank, I had the records, I had the one skill in the house that the thing required, so I did what the house had kept me 40 years to do. I waited until the line was stopped and the hall was empty, which in our house meant the dead middle of the night, the fog off the river standing in the high windows and the working light burning its opinionless white over nothing. There was no trick to any of it, and that is the part I have never been able to make anyone understand. A man imagines there must have been a trick, a forced door, a thing stolen, and there was nothing of the kind. I had the keys I had carried for 30 years. The rank opened any drawer in the house. I went to the long files on the return side, and I found her among the strangers, filed where she belonged, between two names I did not know, because she had crossed often enough to be filed like anyone, and I drew her out. I had put the file back months before, telling myself I would not take it out again, and I took it out again, and I laid its contents on the bench under the working light, the way I had laid 10,000 returnees' records out beside 10,000 returnees to check the one against the other. The photograph, the sheet of her answers in her own hand, the loops of the letters she made, the small box at the foot where the intake clerk had written nothing of note, the band with her voice on it, the dull passage read out and the clerk's small joke at the end and the laugh. Everything the house had thought worth keeping of a woman, which was not much, which is never much, a few ounces of paper and a reel of tape. Every instance of her that was fixed and dated and faithful, I gathered it up. The gathering was the most ordinary thing in the world, a senior man carrying an armful of records across a hall he had crossed for 40 years. No one to see him, nothing to see. The chamber does not care what you feed it. That is the first thing you learn about it, and the last thing you let yourself believe. I had stood at the return side of it my whole life and watched it build 400 strangers a day out of the waiting matter, faithful to whatever account came down the line, and it had never once asked whose account it was, or where it had come from, or whether it was whole. So I did at the building side what the intake men do at the sending side, the motions I had watched 1,000,000 times and never once made. I set the record into it, the photograph and the band and the sheet of her answers, the whole of the kept record of her, put in the way a clerk puts in anything, and the matter was waiting at the far side as it always waits, ordinary matter with nothing of her in it, the same patient stuff that had been 400 strangers that day and would be 400 more. I started the chamber the way a clerk starts the chamber, and it took what I had given it and began to build it back into the matter. Atom set against atom, faithful to the last decimal the record could carry. The hum climbed its half tone. I had heard it climb perhaps 1,000,000 times from the return side, a stranger's papers in my hand and the next stranger already in the queue. I stood on the building side of it now, in the empty hall, and I waited the regulation hour, and then the second regulation hour, the way they had waited for the Thursday man. The way they had waited for her, I was not afraid. Fear is a thing you feel for an outcome you are not sure of, and I was sure. I had read the record, and it was faithful, and whatever the chamber gave back would be faithful to it, because that is the one thing the chamber cannot fail to be. The gray door drew back. She stepped out of the closet that an hour before had been empty, in the coat she had worn the last morning, half on the way she always wore it. And she looked at me, and she said my name, the one she alone used, and I did the only thing I have ever known how to do. I checked her against the record, and she was faithful. She was more than faithful. She was faithful to the band. Because a moment later I said some worn thing to her off the top of the dark, the kind of poor joke I had been making to her for 40 years for the sake of what came after it. And what came after it came the pause. The half-second before the laugh, the small lateness I had heard on the tape, and had not heard across our own table in a year. The eyes going first, and the mouth following, the thing traveling up from the bottom of the pond. It was exact. It matched the band to the 100th. The reading had come clean. The discrepancy I could not bear had closed, and the books the world had refused to balance came right at last, there in the empty hall at my hand, and my wife stood in front of me laughing the laugh she had lost, given back to her off a band of tape to the 100th of a second, and I felt the deep and final satisfaction of a thing made, at last, to agree with its record. I took her home, through the empty streets, before the bells. A thing like that does not go unlogged. The chamber keeps its own record of every account it builds, the hour and the hand, and by the morning the house knew that its senior verifier had been at the building side in the night and had made a woman out of a closed file. I had not hidden it. There was nowhere to hide it, and I had not tried, because hiding it had not occurred to me, any more than it occurs to a man to hide the reconciling of a column. Soren came to the house himself that first morning, I had thought. On the walk home through the fog, that there might be censure in it, some rule I had broken that no one had troubled to write, because no one had imagined a man would do this thing, and there was no censure. He stood a long time in front of her without speaking, and then he turned to me, and his eyes were wet, which in all the years I had never once seen, and he said, "You see, Vale, you see, he did not say what I was to see. He did not need to. He had built a machine to carry a person and keep them faithful, and he had told me for 40 years that faithful enough was the only faithful there had ever been, and here was a woman who had been a dark closet on the Eastern Line, gathered up out of a drawer, and a band and a sheet of her own hand, and made to stand and laugh in a warm room, faithful to the 100th, and the whole argument of his life was standing in front of him in a coat half on. He was not wrong. That was the thing about Soren. He was never wrong on any term he allowed. And he did not keep it to himself, because a thing proven is no use to a man like Soren kept in a drawer. By the afternoon the house had a way of saying it, and the way the house said it became the way the town said it, that the line which took could also give back, that the machine had returned one it had lost, a mercy of the house, the first in the long ledger of the line. No one said a drawer and a band and a clerk alone in the dark. They said the crossing that gave one up instead of taking one, and they believed it. And it was, on every term the house allowed, even true. So they came to the door, the ones who had grieved her, and it was bread again. Bread coming the other way now, the way she had once carried it to the widow 3 doors down, and there was weeping and hands held, and the beginning of the thing the town would tell for a generation. They filled the house. I stood at the edge of it, because I had never been any good at the middle of a thing like that, and they took my stillness for a husband's overflow, which suited me, and let me be. She was warm to them. She held the widow a long time. She was, by every account anyone in that room could keep, herself, come home. We keep them, Soren had always said. We keep them faithful enough, and I had kept her. She tired easily those first days, which everyone laid to the crossing, the way you lay anything to the crossing, and the house gave her time, and the town brought its bread. And in the evenings the kitchen was ours again. She sat at the table. I made the coffee, hot and correct, the way she took it now. And one of those evenings, with the others gone, I said a small thing to her. The name of the town her mother had died in, and she said it back to me. The right name correct in every letter, and a beat late. Half a beat. The way a person gives an answer they have read, and not an answer they have lived, A thing retrieved and not a thing known. I heard it. Of course I heard it. And then I said some other worn and foolish thing, and the pause came before her laugh, the half. Second, exact hers, restored, and the laugh paid out warm and entire across the table between us, and I did not write anything in the notebook that night. She had come back to me with her laugh. A man does not weigh half a beat against that. There was nothing off by a degree that I was willing to call off by a degree. Autumn came on the way autumn comes. The river went from pewter to slate. The fog stayed later into the mornings, and the bells came muffled through it. They put scaffolding up on the old hall at the top of the town and took it down a month later, and no one could afterward have said what had been mended. The bread came and went. There was a wedding in the square one week and a burial out past the tannery the next, and the town did both as a town does. The same faces moving from the one to the other in better coats. Mara was home, and the house had her in it, and for a while that was simply the fact of the days. The town would have told you the days were good ones, and the town was not wrong. At the wedding I stood at the back, where I am always at the back, and I watched the baker give away his daughter, and I saw that he had crossed since the last time I stood near him. The small pull at the left corner of his mouth, the one that had been his for 60 years, had gone level, so that he smiled now with the whole mouth at once, the way a man smiles in a photograph. His daughter kissed the even cheek and wept and saw nothing. No one in the square saw it. I did not write it down. There was nowhere left for such a note to lead but the one place, and I knew the one place by heart. At home it was the cupboards. The first thing I let myself put a word to. She did not leave them open now, and she did not shut them. She took a cup down and closed the door behind it or left it standing, as it fell out, no flag in it either way, and the slow tide she and I had run for 40 years, her opening and my closing, was simply not running. Of an evening I went round the kitchen out of the old habit, and found nothing that needed me. A cupboard had stopped being a sentence. I had a habit I had always had, and only then began to catch myself at. When a thing troubled me, I put a thumb to its edge, the rim of a cup, the lip of a drawer, the spine of a file, and ran it along, as though a wrongness might leave a burr you could feel. I did it to the shut cupboard doors. I did it to the arm of her chair. There was never any burr, because the wrongness in that house had no edge to it. It was a smoothness, and a thumb cannot find a smoothness. I ran my thumb along the edges of things anyway. A man keeps his hands at the work they know. We kept the days. I went up to the house and signed the line and came home. Some evenings we walked down to the water and back, and she put her arm through mine, and the cold came off the river. And once a dog we did not know fell in beside us at the tannery, and stayed as far as the bridge, and then went off about its own business. These things I can tell you for certain happened, because there was no degree in any of them to be off by. The dog was a dog. The bridge was the bridge. It is only people you cannot be sure of. She laughed as she had always laughed. The half-second came back before each laugh. Exact. Hers, the eyes going first. I had given it to her off the tape, and it never failed. So we would sit at the table, and I would say the poor worn thing I had always said, and the pause would come, and the laugh, and for its length the room filled with her. Then I would reach for something only the two of us had ever held. The fair, the barrel organ, the wrong line she sang louder than the right one, and she would meet me with the shape of it and nothing behind the shape. And of course read off a card and hand it back. The laugh had been on the tape. The fair had been on nothing. No band and no plate. Only in the two of us. And one of the two had been a dark closet on the eastern line. So the laugh came home and the fair did not. And she sat across the table laughing her own true laugh over the afternoon. We met and did not know that it was gone. Nothing was wrong that anyone could have shown you. She was well. She was kind. She went about the town, and the town loved her. The widow from 3 doors down caught her by both hands in the square and held on, and Mara held her back the right amount of time and let go a half-moment before the widow was ready to be let go of, which the widow took for tact. The river ran. The bread came. The line carried its 400 a day, and I signed them faithful. If you had come into our kitchen on any evening of that autumn, you would have seen a man and his wife in a warm room, and you would have been right. That was the whole of it. You would have been right. Esme did not come. In all of it, the bread and the wedding, and the long ordinary kindness of a town that had its mercy back, Esme Holt did not come to the house, and sent nothing, and said nothing. She had known Mara longer than I had. She kept a drawer with Mara's face in it at 20 and at 40, caught in the half. Second, before a laugh, fixed where it could not drift. Of everyone in the town, she was the one who held the other pan. She did not come, and I did not yet go to her, and the autumn went on being good. I went to Esme's at last in the dead of the winter, because she had not come to me, and a thing that will not come to you must be gone to. The low streets were iced, and the river ran black between white banks, and the gulls stood about on the ice and did not fly. Her door was the same door, the bell over it the same bell, and inside it smelled as it had always smelled, of the chemicals and the cold and the dust of a room where the light is let in on purpose, and the rest of the time kept out. The walls were drawers, floor to ceiling, 50 years of them, every face the town had ever turned to her camera, filed in the dark by the year. I had stood in that room 100 times and never once thought of it as a place where the truth of people was kept. I thought of it that winter. She was at the long table, where she was always at the long table, and she did not get up. She had 2 prints out under the careful light, and as I came in she laid a third beside them, and then took it away again, deciding and undeciding with her hands the way she always had. An old plate of Mara, the one I knew, the face caught in the half-second, before a laugh. Beside it a new one, taken since, of the woman in my house. She had been at it a long time. I could tell, because the tea at her elbow had gone the color tea goes when no one ever meant to drink it. She did not ask how it was done. The town had its story, and Esme had never once in her life taken the town's story for the truth. She set one finger on the old plate and one on the new. They match, she said. I said faces change, because it was the thing I had to hand. Not like this, she said. They do not change back. I have a drawer of every face in this town at 20 and at 40 and at 60, and not one of them ever changed back, not once in 50 years. The smoothing goes the one way the river goes. And here is a face that went back, the only one in all my drawers that ever recovered the thing the crossing takes, and it recovered it to the 100th. The way a thing recovers, a number it has been handed, and not a thing it has lived. I put my thumb to the edge of the table while she spoke and ran it along. There was no burr in it. There never was. She had worked it, sitting there with the cold tea, the way she worked a face, a beat too long. You built her back, she said. Off the records, off the plates, off this. And the thing I cannot get under or around is that I cannot tell. I have spent my life trusting the silver to tell the true face from the drifted one. And you have made a face that matches the silver to the 100th. And a thing built to match my plates will always match my plates, and so my plates are no use to me against the one thing on earth I would give them to be of use against. You did not lie to the record. That is what I cannot bear. You made the record true, and took the truth out of it. I could have told her she was right. I had more than her drawer. I had the whole house's 400 a day for 30 years, and I knew what I had done in the night to send a thing back against the river, and that her plates and my files and the band in the dark were mirrors of it now, agreeing with the thing because the thing had been raised from them. The last fixed point in the town had been spent, and there was no pan left anywhere to weigh my wife against. I knew it the way I know my own name. I said faces change, Esme. I said everyone's face changes. I said she had a drawer full of the same person at 20 and 40 and 60, and not one of them matched, and all of them were the person, which were her own words, given back to her, as I had given them back to her once before across a cold table. She did not take them this time. She looked at me a long moment, the beat too long, and she said, very quietly, I think you are the saddest man I have ever photographed, and in 40 years I never once caught it, because there was never anything in your face to catch. I left the 2 plates on the table under the light. I went out past the gulls standing on the ice and the black river running between its banks, and the cold was clean and simple and had no opinion about anyone. And I went home to my wife. Winter went on, and we kept the house warm against it. She was well. I have said that, and it stayed true. She went to the market and came back. She mended what wanted mending. She slept beside me and woke beside me, and the town went on loving her. The woman who came back, and the snow came and was cleared and came again. But she had begun, that winter, to stop. She would be in the middle of a thing, a sentence, the laying of a cloth, the start of a story I had heard her tell 100 times, and she would stop and stand, and you could watch her reach for the next of it and find the place where it should have been and not find it. Once she got as far as, "When we were first married, your mother gave me," and then nothing. The rest of it gone off the edge of the table, and she stood with her hand still half lifted toward whatever her mother had given her, and then she put the hand down and asked was there more tea. She did not panic. She had not the equipment for panic anymore. The equipment for panic is among the things the crossing pairs. She felt in the dark for the missing stair, found no stair, and went on without it, because a person can go on without almost anything. That is the horror of a person, how much they can go on without. She asked me, one of those nights, in the dark, the way she asked the things that frightened her, lightly, the chin down where I could not see it. She said my name. Then she said, "Do I seem like me?" I want you to understand what she was asking, and of whom. She was asking the one man in the world who could have told her, not because I loved her, though the town would have said it was because I loved her, because I was the verifier, and the reading of a returned soul against its record was the whole of what I was, and I had her record by heart, the band, the plates, the sheet of her answers, the half-second to the 100th. If anyone could have laid the woman in the dark beside the record of the woman and told her true whether she was herself, it was the man she had married, and she knew it. That is why she asked me, and not the doctor, and not her own heart, which could not tell her, because no heart can run a reading on the chest it beats in. She asked the instrument. She had married the instrument. She did not know, even then, how exactly she had married it. And the instrument knew the answer. I knew it the way I knew the smoothing goes one way, and the way I knew her file matched the woman because the woman had been raised from the file. She was faithful to the last decimal the record could carry, and the record had never carried the fair or the wrong line or whatever it is in a person that has no reason in it and so cannot be written down. And those were gone. And what lay beside me in the dark was the most faithful approximation of my wife that kept record of her could raise, and not my wife, and the difference was the whole of her, and could be measured by no one and felt by anyone, which is the cruelty the keystone keeps in its other hand. I said, "You are exactly yourself." I said it the way I had signed 400 a day for 30 years, in the voice that closes the queue and moves the line and sends the faithful out into the far city to be whatever they now are. It was the truest lie I have ever told, and the only comfort I had left to give, the kind with the heat gone out of it, a certification. My name under hers one last time. She heard it. She was the one instrument still pointed at me, and she heard exactly what was in it and what was not. She said, "All right," in the dark, the way she had taken to saying all right. And she turned and slept, or did the thing that had come to stand in for sleeping, and I lay and listened to her breathe, even and faithful and nearly whole. And out in the dark the line ran its 400, and the river ran under the ice, and nothing, anywhere, was wrong that anyone could have shown you. They came for what I knew the way they come for anything that works, quietly, and then all at once, and then as though it had always been so. The thing I had done in the night, alone, with an armful of records and an empty hall, did not stay a thing done once. It could not. Soren had seen to that, because a proof in Soren's hands was never a thing left in a drawer, and the house had seen the proof, and the men 3 floors up had seen what the house had seen, that the line which took could give back, that a person was a record, that a record could be kept, and a kept record raised again into waiting matter, faithful to the last decimal it carried. They had always known the line could remove. Now they knew it could replace. And a thing that can remove and replace, quietly the book's balancing to the gram, is not a means of transport. It is a form of government. I will give you one, because the rest of it was only this one again and again, and a man should be made to look at the one before he is let off with the number. There was a meeting that winter in the old hall at the top of the town about a new station on the Western Line, the kind of meeting a town holds so that it can feel it was asked. A man stood up in it. I knew him by sight, a school teacher, careful, with ink on his fingers, the sort who reads the notice twice. He said into the warm and bored room that he had been thinking, and wished to ask a question, and the question was whether anyone had satisfied themselves that the people who came back off the line were the same people who had stepped onto it. He said it without heat. He did not doubt the engineering, he said. He could simply not see how a man would tell from the outside, and it seemed to him a thing worth being sure of before they built another station to do more of it. The room laughed. The warm laugh a room gives a man who has said the thing one does not say, and the chairman thanked him, and the meeting went on to the matter of the benches, and the teacher sat down with his inked hands in his lap, and that was the whole of it. 3 weeks later, Carr came to my desk with his cold cup of tea he did not drink. The same gray and forgettable man, and he had a small matter. There was a person, he said, whose record the funders held, who had become, in some way he did not trouble me with, unreconcilable with how things were to be. He wondered whether the record might be raised. After, he wondered whether I would take the departure. He laid a transit on the desk, and the name on it was the teacher's. I took the departure. The teacher came through my line on a Thursday with a case and a scarf his wife had knitted, going west to look at the new station for the school, he told me. Because frightened people tell me things, and he was a little frightened, the way the careful are. I checked him against his file. He was faithful, the reading clean, and I signed him. And he went to the chamber with the scarf still on, and the gray door drew across him, and the hum climbed its half-tone, and the closet stayed dark. A rare and blameless failure on the Western Line. The house grieved it with a notice in a folded form. A season on, 3 stations off, a closet filled, and the teacher came home. The town wept the particular grateful weeping of people handed back what they had grieved, and his wife wept hardest, and the school took him back, and he was, by every account, anyone could keep himself. I saw him once after at the market, buying apples, his hands still inked. I stood near him the way I had once stood near frightened people, and I asked him, because I could not help the asking, whether he still thought about the question he had put to the meeting. He looked at me pleasantly, the whole mouth at once, and said, "What question?" and bought his apples, and went home to the wife who had him back, faithful enough, and asked nothing further of the line for the rest of his life. I took the reading. I set that down without softening. I did not refuse Carr then any more than the first time, because he had not asked a thing that could be refused, only that I do my work faithfully, which was the one thing I had never once been asked twice. There was, by then, no line left in me to cross. A man crosses a line the first time and feels it, and the 100th time and does not, and I was a long way past the 100th. It went on. It widened the way water widens, finding the level it was always going to find. More records were raised, more closets stayed dark their hour, and then filled a season on with a faithful enough version of what had gone in, and the families wept their grateful weeping, and the town told its generation's story of the mercy of the line, and the bread came, and the river ran. Nothing broke. That is the thing I keep returning to. You expect, at the place where a world goes wrong, that something will break, a glass, a bone, a held silence, and nothing broke. The trains ran on time. They ran better than they had ever run. I walked home those evenings as I had always walked home, down past the tannery to the bridge. The dog that had once fallen in beside us was an old dog by then, and then it was not there anymore. The way dogs are not there anymore. The cold came off the water. The lamps came on along the river one by one, as a man I never saw went round with his pole. The town was beautiful in the evenings, and full, and faithful, and I do not think there was a single soul in it by then, including the one walking home, that anyone alive could have proved. As May Holt died in the spring, which is a thing that happens to the old, when the cold lets go of them at last, the body having held on through the winter out of some habit of holding on. They found her at the long table with the light let in and a print under her hand. They told me of it the way they tell the verifier things, because I had known her, and I went down to the low streets one more time, past the river running brown and high with the melt, and I stood in the room that smelled of the chemicals and the cold. There was a print still under her hand. It was no one I knew, an old river man at 20 and at 60, the two of them side by side, the late face smoothed. She had died doing the thing she had done all her life, holding two faces up against each other and grieving the difference. The last person in the town who still thought the difference worth the grief. I was there when they came for the drawers. I had not meant to be. I had meant to be gone before it. I was slow that day. So I stood against the wall while two men from the house carried out 50 years of the town's faces. They did it the way men carry anything heavy and dull, sideways through the door, resting a drawer on a knee to get a better hold, calling to each other to mind the step. Every soul in the town was in those drawers, at 20 and 40 and 60, fixed on silver dated in her hand. The only record of any of us the house had not made and did not already hold. They loaded them onto a cart. One drawer slid, and a man caught it with his boot and swore mildly and shoved it square with the others. And they put a tarpaulin over the lot against the wet and took the town away to be filed, where it would be raised as wanted into the waiting matter. I watched the cart go up the low street and turn at the top, and I was the only one who saw it go, and no one then or since has asked me where the faces went. The last pan in the world was not broken, you understand. It was put on a cart in the rain and filed. After that there was no one. I do not mean no one to mind. The town minded. The town wept. The town was full of feeling, full of weddings and funerals and bread and the small ferocious loves of ordinary days. I mean, there was no one left who held the other pan, no one outside the man who could no longer be checked, holding him against the record of what he had been. The smoothing went on the one way it goes. The raised came back faithful enough. The crossings ran their 400 a day. A whole town, a whole country for all I could see of it, went about being well and kind and faithful to the last decimal of a record, and not one soul in it could have been proved by anyone to be the soul it had been. And not one soul in it minded, because minding is among the things that do not survive the reading. The trains ran on time. I say it again because it is the whole of the horror, and I have never found a larger way to say it. Nothing broke. The world I had spent my life keeping faithful was, at the last, perfectly faithful. Faithful as a photograph, faithful as a number, and there was no one in it, and it was beautiful in the evenings. And the lamps came on, along the water one by one. She is at the table. That is where I leave her, because that is where she still is. The evening comes in off the river, and I say the poor kind of thing I have always said, and the pause comes before her laugh, the half-second, exact, hers, and the laugh pays out warm and entire across the room, and for the length of it she is every degree the woman I married. The town loves her. The bread comes. The lamps go on along the water one by one. Nothing is wrong that anyone could ever show you, and I would not show you any if I could, because there is none. There is one reading I never made. I made it last, when there was no one left to ask it of me, in the dead of the place with the line stopped and the hall empty, the way I have done the one or two private things of my life. I drew my own file from the long drawers, where it had always been, between two names I did not know, and I laid it out under the working light the way I have laid 10,000 others. The photograph. The band, the sheet of my answers in my own hand, and I set myself beside it to check the one against the other. There was nothing to check. There was the record, and there was the man, and there was no third thing, no second of me to lay the two against, no pan that was not already a mirror of the thing it would weigh. I have crossed more than any man alive. I never counted. A man does not count the thing he does for his living. I went to read myself the way I have read 400 a day for 30 years, and I could not get the reading to close. I stood a long time over it. Then I put the file back between the two names I did not know, and I left it, because a man cannot lay himself beside another, and there is only ever the one of him, and he is the single instrument in the world he can never turn upon himself. I told you that on the first page. Nothing is lost. I have said it all my life, and it is true. It was always true. The columns come right. You can audit them. Not 1 gram, not 1 joule, not 1 decimal ever went missing across a crossing. Everything is conserved. Everything is still here, faithful and dated and kept. The town and the river and the woman at the table and the hand that is writing this. It is only the thing with no reason in it, the open door, the wrong line, whatever in a person is pure choice and pure waste and pure them, that the conserving cannot carry, and so does not. That is the only thing that goes, and the books still balance, to the last decimal, over the place where it was. So I am setting her down for you, the whole of her, every degree of her true. Hold her. I am handing her to you whole, exactly as she was. I want you to have seen her too.